Today we are going to butcher a lamb. Our butchery is going to be guided by a couple principles. As always, zero trim. There's really nothing we're going to remove and throw away from this lamb carcass. She gave it all. It is all delicious. Our primary goal today is to make the four-legged beast that is a lamb fit in your pots, your pans, and your oven. That's it. If you know how to braise, pan fry, and roast, that is to say, rightly use your pots, your pans, and your oven, then you are more qualified to butcher a lamb than anyone else. That is the end of what we're doing today. The ontological end. So what that means is, if at the end of the day, you've gotten through the carcass and you can't remember the names of cuts or necessarily even where they come from, but you cook a cut and then it tastes real good, tastes well, that means you butchered properly. And so with the final cause in view, knowing that the exact placement of each individual cut doesn't matter that much, I'm going to show you the exact individual placement of each cut. Really, you'll find you can fit a lamb carcass in your brain. It's not that complex of a thing. And by the way, if you can fit a lamb carcass in your brain, you can also fit any other four-legged beast that we commonly consume in your brain. What we're going to do today works for venison, for goat, for old, mutton. I dare say you could even start a beef cow this way because being a four-legged animal, its pelvis and its shoulder blade are in the same place. And everything kind of trickles down from the placement of those two very strangely shaped bones as they divide muscles that have a tough, chewy texture from those that don't. But I digress. The most important thing, not the most important thing, probably the most important thing is a sharp knife. Right here, see? The thing about this knife is not its special shape or its Japanese design. The thing about this knife is that it is sharp. That's why we can use this. It's helpful to have a scabbard. A scabbard is one mechanism to avoid the soiling of your hands. If you're butchering with your knife and you set it down on the table because you don't have a scabbard, inevitably the table is going to be greased in a film of animal fats, which will then impart the film to your knife handle, which will also imbue your hand with unctuous soft skin, all of which will make it difficult to hold the knife. Always keep your knife hand fatless and attached to the fatless handle of your knife. The other thing is a very heavy cleaver, and this one weighs almost 3 pounds. Anything less than 3 pounds and you are going to be hating your life and your butchery experience, and that is not the goal. We're not going to chop through leg bones, just spine and fibrous bone like the spine. Might only be the spine, actually. Maybe some rib tips. And then a bone saw. This is indeed a saw designed for the sawing of bone. Another essential would be a larding needle. A larding needle is what is going to allow us to inject noodles of pork back fat into our lamb. And then I like to keep a bench knife or a scraper always handy because I can remove and just any bone dust or any little bits of fat that might be on my cutting table. I always like to cut meat on a clean table, even in the middle of a session. And you'll see what I mean as we go along. Because if you don't constantly keep the table clean, each individual cut, even if it's real, you cut it perfectly and it's beautiful, it could have bone dust and fat globules sticking to it, and that's not so pretty. And it usually picks all of those up from the table. Speaking of bone dust, that's what this here is for. This is for raking the bones so that we can, or the meat rather, so that we can remove any bone dust generated by the saw. I've got some hemp twine that we may use to tie some roasts. And then the other essential element to the butchery of anything other than a pig is the fat of the pig. So it's always good to have some pork back fat on hand for sausage making and today for larding. This happens to be some cured smoked back fat. Okay, I think that's all the things I wanted to say. It's probably all the things that I should say. I should stop talking. Let us butcher a lamb so as to cook it efficiently and deliciously. Here we have have a lovely little Vachon lamb, about a year old. It's a lean, young little Cheviot lamb that we will carve up today. I actually didn't weigh the lamb. I don't know how much it weighs, but it actually doesn't matter so much. Today, we're gonna butcher this lamb on the table. First thing I'm gonna do is take off these pin bones up here. And the general rule with the knife is the knife for the flesh, the saw for the bone. And when we do that, the saw is less likely to shred meat. These little guys are great, these little pin bones. They provide you with excellent fodder for your stock pot. I killed this lamb a week ago, and I tend to leave these on. I skin these with the carcass because there's plenty of good collagen in there for the stock pot. Super yummy stuff. Now I'm gonna cut off the neck. And for removing the neck, it's kind of arbitrary as to where you would like to make the separation. I kind of find the contour of the top of the shoulder right here. Just get the meat out of the way, like that. Then you can come in with the saw, and just let the saw do all the work, the friction of the teeth. If the saw is getting hung up on you, it's because you're bearing down on it, you're pushing on it. This is where the bone duster comes in handy. I'll rid the carcass of a little bit of that bone dust and the table. Otherwise it will smear on everything else. And if there is anything that we don't necessarily want to eat from this lamb, it's all of this business up here. You can see how this is bloody and there's some wool, even hair still attached to it. This is where the head was removed. And so it can be a little funky. For that reason, I tend to remove the funky parts, and it's not gonna be wasted. Neck, low and slow braising. These little guys, these are the foreshanks. And you can saw them off, or you can joint it with your knife. It's kind of a funky joint. You have to start up here above the elbow, and then you have to go downwise. Know what I mean? And all the while, as you're making these incisions, push down. I even hang it off the end of the table so that it opens up for that joint. There we go. Little foreshank of lamb. And I'll do the same exact process for the second one. These are wonderful. You just want to braise these low and slow. Some stock and a little bit of mild beer. Actually, they're wonderful braised with beer. Okay, so we've got the neck, we've got the four shanks off. Now we're going to take off the back leg. And to do this, it's helpful to find the crook in the spine. You can see this is where the tail is that goes up through the pelvis. What we want to do is find right where that spine angles down towards the tail. And it's a pretty steep angle. So there is the crook in the spine. As the spine goes up to the tail, one vertebra in the direction of the head puts me on this disc. That is going to be where we'll separate the back leg quarter from everything else. And the thing about that is that that's the same on all quadrupeds. And in between each vertebra are the discs, and you can put your knife in halfway through the spine along each one. And that is our marker. The advantage of this is that we are being good to our future selves. We're setting ourselves up to have loin chops that are one vertebra each in thickness. Cut through, making sure the two planes match up pretty well, and then just hyperextend it and cut it away. There's the two back legs. We've got the rib, the loin, and the shoulder. I like to remove first the hanger steak and the skirt. This is the diaphragm. We're gonna remove it now because we want to treat those separately. And that's simple. I just take the red meat out and we'll remove the membranous clear silver skin from the skirts. Kind of like that. There's that clear stuff. Also good for the sock pot. Once you get that out of there, you can go right in and remove the skirt stake. This is a very little muscle. I don't bother peeling them on young lambs. You can, there is a silver skin on there that'll make them just slightly, less toothsome. Toothsome is how you say chewy, but in a positive light. These can fry hot and fast. They are super delicious. These are the essence of the flavor of any quadruped. On a lamb, it's the most lamby. On a pig, it's the most piggy. Skirts and hangers, diaphragm. Hot and fast, some butter and salt. Here's where the neck was, the foreshanks, we've got the spine, and we've got the ribs, and a little bit of flank hanging here. And then the short loin where the T-bones would be on a beef cow. This is where we're going to cut the ribs. And if you've butchered lamb for any length of time, you know that the cutting of lamb ribs is a frustrating endeavor because there's so little and they're not very solidly suspended in the meat, and so they're constantly going back and forth with the friction of the saw, and at best you're not really sawing through them so much as you're splintering through them, and you get splinters and it's a little frustrating. So I find the best way to handle this process is to cut them sooner rather than later, because right now the rib is encased in a huge piece of the carcass. Rather than taking an individual little rib roast and trying to cut the ribs, 7 ribs, 8 ribs off of a rib roast, I go right up basically to what would be the armpit here, and I'm just gonna score the meat with my knife and come out like that. Now I can come in with the saw. And the thing about the saw, at least mine, is I've got it oriented with the teeth facing this way so it cuts on the push. If you want to have a smoother glide through splintery bones, only cut on the pull, like that. It's much less aggressive. And on these thin little rib bones, it's easier. You get a slightly cleaner cut all the way down. If you are going to cut on the push, lift up on the pressure of the saw significantly. That way it won't bite and catch on you. Alright, so I just go basically to the middle of the sternum here. Now I'm going to make the same line on this side, starting from just under the armpit, coming out up here to the flank. But it's got a bit of an arc in it, and that seems to work fine. With this one, get it started with the pull, and then real light pushes on the saw. Don't push down, just through. There we go. Like to get rid of the bone dust. Now we've got this lamb breast. We have the chest and the ribs. Just go right down the middle, and right down the middle of the sternum here. Kind of like lamb spare ribs, as it were. You can almost do that with your knife. These lamb briskets are pretty tender on young lambs like this. I like these just like this. I might stuff it with whole cloves of garlic and fennel or something, roll it up and tie it like that, and then just a low, slow braise. You can also grill them. Short loin, this is where the tenderloin is, right here. So to remove the loin, I like to get some of this aortal vessel running along the spine out of the way so I can see the spine. Great for the stock pot. I'm gonna work with discs. There's a disc, there's a disc, there's a disc. What that should give us is 5 loin chops. So anytime you're doing chops, those are cuts away from the spine. You want them to radiate out from it, exactly perpendicular to it, regardless of what the ribs are doing. And I'm gonna pick this disc right here. I go in there in a straight line, meaning perpendicular to the spine, to the tip of the next rib. There's the tip of the rib. I don't want to start on this one and then follow the contour of the rib, because then it's going to give us a triangular chop at some point. So you frequently have to navigate the ribs and even push them over. And now that makes this surface perpendicular to the spine and this surface perpendicular to the spine, which is going to give us chops possessed by equidistance. They're not going to be triangular, thin at one end and thick at the next. They're going to be even thickness all the way through the chop. Same thing on this side. Through the disc, all the way down. And then I can pull it off the end of the table here. And it'll just pull right out. You know, right out. There we go. All right, look at this. This is a short loin roast or a saddle roast.